Hello YouTube, I'm Zach, and today I thought I'd do something a bit different. I came across the YouTube channel AlKanadiya, a Canadian woman married to a Saudi man who has a YouTube channel promoting Islamic extremism. 2 weeks ago, she published a video called Why Girls Run from Saudi Arabia, and I was outraged beyond words. Something about a Canadian woman who enjoys all of her freedoms, someone who is from a religious minority, no less, supporting the religious supremacy of the Saudi regime and its state of patriarchy just really doesn't sit right with me. It takes a special disregard and lack of empathy for a woman who enjoys all of her freedoms to so openly support the subjugation and slavery of other women in this way. And so I thought I'd respond to what she had to say on this and clarify a few points.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. Today I'm going to be talking to you about girls who run away from Saudi Arabia. Up until recently, we have seen, especially in recent years, a large amount of these atheists or feminists or girls crying oppression, and they want to seek refuge in other countries. It's become a very big trend, and the reason why it's become a very big trend is because when girls see other girls going to these Western countries and getting welfare, social assistance, large amounts of money, these grants to go to education and government-sponsored houses, they think, wow, lucky.
Okay, first of all, large sums of money, government assistance, government houses. I don't know what class of Saudi refugee you've been hanging out with. I'm guessing none. But Saudi women seeking asylum are generally processed in crowded refugee camps just like everyone else. And if granted asylum, they have to apply for social assistance just like everybody else, so that they can have the bare minimum to live and integrate into society. And just like you point out near the end of the video, as you apparently contradict yourself, women who end up escaping Saudi Arabia often end up in very disadvantaged situations with no support structure, in a situation that is far from enviable. But what if the alternative is forced marriage, being a perpetual minor who cannot make their own career choices? What if the alternative is slavery?
People who are wanting to leave Saudi Arabia are not examples of good people, but rather people who are rebels and they seek rebellion, they seek chaos, they seek doing things that even in the West is seen as destructive behavior. Like, I don't know anyone growing up in Canada who said, I want to become an alcoholic or this sort of thing. But these people are seeking this kind of behavior.
In the honor culture of Saudi Arabia, problems are swept under the rug rather than dealt with openly. And what we're left with are abusers who will never see the inside of a courtroom, and overfilled women's prisons, in which women are indefinitely held if their male guardian for some reason refuses to pick them up. Those women are sold off into sex slavery, or as they call it in Saudi Arabia, marriage, to prisoners, in the cruelest, most twisted concept of rehabilitation that I had ever come across. So to say that they leave because they want to be alcoholics and drug addicts is missing the point on purpose. Those women are fleeing legitimate and systematic persecution just so that they can one day hope to enjoy the very basic human rights, to be treated the same by the law as everyone else, regardless of their gender. Women don't have that in Saudi Arabia, and they are right to pursue liberty elsewhere. This is coming from someone who has lived most of their lives in Saudi Arabia and has known many women who had to flee, some of which being close family members.
These type of people are not type of people who want to live in a Muslim society. It's not just Saudi Arabia, but it's a Muslim society that they don't want to live in, because these people, they want the freedom to do drugs, alcohol, they want the freedom to fornicate, they want the freedom to date, they want the freedom to walk naked. And this is what they are seeking, so they want to leave Saudi Arabia, which is a strict Muslim country that has over time, throughout history, been implementing the Islamic law and it has rules and social guidelines, as do all societies.
Look, just because all societies have rules and social guidelines does not make all of them equally valid. Some laws are just and some laws are unjust, and it is our responsibility to resist unjust rules and guidelines. Your right to follow your religion stops at my freedom. And just as you have enjoyed your freedom to be Muslim in the non-Muslim majority countries of Canada and Japan, non-Muslims as well as Muslims in Saudi Arabia are entitled to freedom of conscience even when their ideas don't align with yours. As a Muslim who is in the minority, I had hoped that you'd have the empathy to understand our need for religious freedom, but then again, Islam and empathy have never really gone hand in hand, have they?
The media has got it all wrong, and this is the reason why even today, even with the tourist visas open and people can go see for themselves that Saudi Arabia is a great country and people love it there, unfortunately still today there's people who think that Saudi Arabia is like a jail for women, even though it's like a palace for women. I mean, I don't know what there's to complain about. They got their own drivers to drive them around. Isn't that what kings and queens want? Isn't that what all the rich people have? People to drive them around? People to clean their houses for them and cook for them? Isn't that what the rich people have?
No, that's most certainly not what everybody wants, and the self-sufficiency of being able to drive your own car is to many women preferable to having a driver and depending on a man for every little thing. And furthermore, you seem to be under the impression that everybody in Saudi Arabia has drivers and maids to serve them 24/7. Well, I have news for you. Not everybody can afford that. I won't even go into the problems associated with the predatory hiring practices and lack of worker protections over there when it comes to domestic workers, because that's a whole other topic that we can get into. Suffice it to say, though, that it really doesn't make the situation of women in Saudi Arabia any better.
Bodyguards, well, for Saudi women, that would be an army of their brothers and cousins who would stand up for them if anything went wrong.
An army of brothers and cousins whom you can only hope have the good temperament not to beat you up if you talk to a man outside of your family. Now, look, I can understand your point about being there for one another and taking collective responsibility while ignoring the patriarchal framework that you presented it in. But we cannot pretend that that is all that it is. It's also an honor culture, like I said earlier, and it's the reason why honor killings are a big problem in places like Saudi Arabia and not in, say, Canada. The widely accepted culture in Saudi Arabia dictates that fathers and husbands have the right to women's bodies. People actually move from civilized countries to Saudi Arabia for the express purpose of being able to abuse their women, as a Syrian man who has moved from Germany to Saudi Arabia once told me. You can't even slap your daughter over there. You can't determine where she can and can't go. This tribal mindset that's overly concerned with arbitrary standards of honor and purity and not concerned nearly enough about the well-being of human beings is not the fringe, unfortunately, but the norm in Saudi Arabia.
Everything that I grew up with in Canada, I look at and I say, Alhamdulillah, I'm Muslim now, and mashallah, so lucky for all the Saudi women. They didn't have to deal with all these things. They didn't have to deal with weird teachers and perverted subjects being taught to them in school. They didn't.
Yeah, I'll use this as an opportunity to point one thing out in regards to sexual education. If your high school graduates don't know so much as how to use a condom, then your system is a failure, because just as you yourself will point out, people do have sex in and outside of marriage, even in Saudi Arabia. And the amount of people who aren't educated in how to stay safe is simply astonishing.
Have to deal with being forced to pay taxes, or they didn't have to deal with being forced to go down the streets, being subjugated, or even bullying, as slandering and bullying someone in Saudi Arabia is really against the law. And in Canada, you know, it's an ongoing battle to stop bullying in school. You got suicide rates, you got teen pregnancy, these issues that Saudi Arabian women don't even have to deal with, don't even have to think about.
Okay, I'm unclear as to whether you had ever actually lived in Saudi Arabia, but I can assure you that you are wrong. Saudi women do have to deal with all of those issues just like everybody else. But they're just swept under the rug. They're kept away from everyone because, well, again, the concept of honor. People attempt to commit suicide in Saudi Arabia, but it's just not something people talk about. The claim that people don't have to deal with bullying in Saudi Arabia just like everywhere else in the world is quite simply absurd. Children pick on one another. Sexual harassment in public is a big problem over there, as I'm sure any Saudi woman would attest to you. If you want to talk about the systematic targeting and persecution of religious minorities in Saudi Arabia, that can also be characterized as bullying. Teenage girls are often married off and have to carry children into their teenage years as well. So Saudi Arabia is not a land free of suicide, bullying, and teenage pregnancy. That is quite simply absurd.
They had everything. They could travel. They had money to travel. They had money to buy all the clothes they wanted, all the food they wanted. You never go hungry in Saudi Arabia. And they could just do anything, drive around. Their brothers would drive them around and they would be doing everything. And even Rahaf admitted herself that she was a party animal in Saudi Arabia. She was doing drugs, she was drinking, and she was fornicating with people, and she admitted that in a drunk live stream. And that was 2 years after she escaped Saudi Arabia. And it's like, wow, the West just bought into her big speech how she's finally happy she can finally go to school. And what did she do? 2 years? She just became an alcoholic and a drug addict and brags about how many men she's slept with. Wow. A great improvement. Like, wake up. Wake up, Western media. Wake up.
And doesn't that contradict your whole point about women leaving so that they can drink and party? What Saudi women generally do not have is the choice over where and what they study, how they lead their careers, as well as when and whom they marry. Being able to sneak off to a party once in a while is really not the same as having agency over your life.
Also, recently they discovered a Saudi Arabian woman who actually left a few years ago, and now she's homeless in London. She has nothing. She's homeless and she's helpless. Look, this is what happens, and this is really what happens when you leave Saudi Arabia, especially in this way, because these people, they don't leave and actually seek a great life. When you look at their life, it's like dramatic. Like Salwa Al-Zarani, like she is another famous one. She got evicted from her apartment and freaked out. And it's like, well, welcome to Canada, because that's what happens in Canada.
Being a refugee is not easy, okay? Neither is being an ex-Muslim. Nobody has ever claimed that it was. People have to flee from dangerous situations every day, and their host countries aren't always very understanding. People are being abandoned by their family and friends simply for being different. Sometimes they can't work or find a proper home, and naturally, as the whole world has turned their backs on some of us will fall into homelessness, turn to drugs, struggle with addiction, depression, and yes, suicidality. That's an important reason why we need to stick by one another and help one another. But remember, extremists like yourself are the reason why we're unsafe in our own countries. Your amusement at our plight is morbid and disgusting, which I suppose is to be expected from an Islamic extremist because, well, nothing is funnier to an Islamist than to see someone who disagrees with them suffer, right?
It's sickening, because these people from beginning, they don't like Islam. It's the problem with them is not Saudi Arabia. The problem with them is Islam. The fact that they have to get permission from their father or their guardian to get married. This is an Islamic thing. The fact that they can't travel without a male guardian this is Islamic thing. When the West sees this, ooh, oppression,
Well, much of the oppression in Saudi Arabia is Islamic, so there's no question about that. So yeah, I do have a problem with Saudi Arabia, and I do have a problem with Islam. But most pressingly, I have a problem with Islam in government. Because it is unfair to me as a non-Muslim to have the rules of your ideology forced on me. It is unfair to other Muslims who interpret Islam differently. It is unfair to women. It is unfair to the LGBT community, and undoubtedly many other groups. I don't disagree that the patriarchal laws in Saudi Arabia are Islamic, but the way I see it, that is even more reason to get rid of them.
It's unfortunate that the media doesn't give Saudi Arabian women who actually love their country a voice, because there's so many who actually say enough is enough, stop talking bad about my country, and they don't get a voice because the Western media does not show it, because it's not entertaining. Oops, you love Saudi Arabia? No, not allowed to do that. And it's unfortunate. That's what happens all the time. All the time. Even me, like I said when I announced to the world like a few years ago I love Saudi Arabia, people freaked out and big drama. It's like, I'm not allowed to like a country? It doesn't make any sense. And there's no reason to hate Saudi Arabia because it was a great country. But anyways, that's pretty much sums up my video. Thank you for watching. Assalamu alaikum.
And finally, look, you can like Saudi Arabia all you want. I like the landscape. I like certain aspects of the culture, the cuisine. Some of the people I love most dearly in the world live there, but I know that the only way to help my country is to expose its problems and work on fixing them. Your liking a country does not excuse your blatantly denying the existence of all of its problems, nor does it make the crimes of its leaders magically disappear. Your open support of policies that treat women as second-class citizens is what should raise red flags, not your simply liking Saudi Arabia. If you'd like to see more of what I do, then consider subscribing to my channel if you hadn't already. Consider sharing my message if it is safe for you to do so. And with that, until next time, bye.